The surprise visit happened on a cold Thursday morning in January, when Isabella Santos, a 67-year-old retired teacher, was doing what she had done every week for the past 8 years, organizing donations and preparing food packages at the Caritas Food Bank in one of Madrid's most economically challenged neighborhoods, work that she had started after her husband passed away, and she realized that staying busy helping others was the only way to cope with the loneliness and sense of purposelessness that had threatened to overwhelm her during those first dark months of widowhood. Isabella had never sought recognition for her volunteer work, arriving quietly each week at 6 a.m. to sort through donations, check expiration dates, and carefully pack bags according to family size and dietary needs, always making sure to include a small treat for children, and taking extra care to preserve the dignity of recipients by ensuring that everything was clean, organized, and presented with the same respect she would want for her own family if circumstances had been different. What made Isabella special among the volunteers was her attention to individual families' needs. She remembered that Mrs. Garcia's diabetic husband needed sugar-free options, that the Moroccan family couldn't eat pork, that little Ahmed had a severe nut allergy, and that elderly Mr. Rodriguez lived alone and appreciated smaller portions that wouldn't spoil before he could eat them, treating each person not as a case number or charity recipient, but as a neighbor whose circumstances required temporary assistance during a difficult period. The food bank director, Carmen, had often told other volunteers that Isabella was the heart of their operation, not just because of her reliability and organization skills, but because of the way she greeted every person who came for help with genuine warmth and respect, never asking intrusive questions about their situations, but always offering a kind word, a listening ear, or practical advice about other resources that might be helpful, creating an atmosphere where people felt welcomed rather than judged during what was often one of the most humbling experiences of their lives. On this particular Thursday, Isabella was working alone in the storage area, humming softly to herself while organizing a large delivery of canned goods that had arrived the previous evening, when she heard unfamiliar voices in the main distribution area and assumed that Carmen had arrived early with some new volunteers who needed orientation. So she continued her work without investigating, focused on the methodical process of categorizing items and checking inventory that she found both meditative and deeply satisfying, because it represented tangible progress toward helping families in need. What she didn't know was that Ronaldo had been quietly researching food insecurity in Madrid for weeks, motivated by a conversation with his housekeeper about the increasing number of families in her neighborhood who were struggling to afford basic groceries despite working multiple jobs. And he had reached out to several charitable organizations asking not for photo opportunities or publicity events, but for ways to contribute meaningfully to addressing hunger in his adopted city, specifically requesting to meet the volunteers and staff who were doing the day-to-day work, rather than simply writing a check and moving on to the next cause. Carmen had been so surprised by the call from Ronaldo's foundation that she initially thought it was a prank, but after several conversations with his team and careful verification of their intentions, she had agreed to a visit with the understanding that it would be low-key, educational, and focused on learning about the real challenges facing food banks, rather than creating content for social media or marketing purposes. When Ronaldo walked into the storage area where Isabella was working, she looked up from her inventory sheet with a polite smile, assuming he was a new volunteer, and said in her warm, maternal voice, "Good morning, dear. I'm Isabella. Carmen must be showing you around. Welcome to our little operation. Have you volunteered at a food bank before?" For a moment, Ronaldo was so charmed by her matter-of-fact greeting that he almost played along. But then he realized that Isabella genuinely didn't recognize him, which in itself was remarkable given his global fame, and he introduced himself simply, watching as her eyes widened and her hand flew to her heart when she realized who was standing in front of her. "Oh my goodness," she whispered. "You're Cristiano Ronaldo. But what are you doing here? I mean, of course you're welcome, but..." She trailed off, clearly flustered and trying to process this unexpected encounter And Ronaldo quickly explained that he had come to learn about their work and see if there were ways he could help, reassuring her that he wasn't there for publicity, but because he genuinely wanted to understand how food insecurity affected families in Madrid and what role he might play in addressing the problem. What happened next would become the most heartwarming part of the visit, as Isabella, recovering from her initial shock, immediately shifted into her natural role as educator and advocate, giving Ronaldo a detailed tour of the facility while explaining the logistics of food distribution, the challenges of managing donations with varying expiration dates, the importance of maintaining nutritional balance in emergency food packages, and the complex dignity issues involved in serving people who are often working parents, elderly individuals on fixed incomes, or families facing temporary crises rather than chronic poverty. Ronaldo listened intently, asking thoughtful questions about everything from storage requirements to the emotional toll on volunteers, and Isabella found herself opening up about the personal rewards of the work, how it had given her life meaning after her husband's death, how she had learned about resilience and gratitude from the families she served, and how the experience had changed her perspective on community, privilege, and the thin line that separated security from vulnerability in modern society. When Isabella mentioned that one of their biggest challenges was transportation, many elderly and disabled clients had difficulty reaching the food bank, and the organization lacked resources for delivery services, Ronaldo immediately asked for specifics about costs, logistics, and potential solutions, taking notes on his phone while Isabella explained the geographic distribution of their clients and the barriers that prevented some of the most vulnerable people from accessing the services they needed. The emotional peak of the visit came when Isabella showed Ronaldo a wall where they displayed thank you notes from families they had helped, including drawings from children, photos of graduates who had found stable employment, and letters from elderly clients expressing gratitude for both the food assistance and the human connection that came with each visit. And she pointed to one note from a single mother who had written, "Isabella always remembers my daughter's name and asks about her school. That kindness means more than the food." As Ronaldo read these testimonials, Isabella watched his face and saw genuine emotion rather than the polite interest she might have expected from a celebrity making a charitable appearance. And when he asked if he could meet some of the families they served, she realized that his intention was not to be seen helping, but to truly understand the human impact of poverty and the ways that community support could make a difference in people's lives during their most challenging moments. The surprise that Ronaldo had planned became apparent when several trucks arrived with enough food to stock the pantry for 3 months. But more significantly, he announced the establishment of a permanent fund to support not just food purchases, but also the transportation program that Isabella had described, along with funding for additional volunteer training and facility improvements that would allow them to serve more families more effectively while maintaining the personal touch that made Isabella's approach so special. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came when Ronaldo asked Isabella if she would be willing to advise him on other charitable initiatives, explaining that her knowledge of community needs and her practical approach to helping others were exactly what he needed to ensure that his philanthropic efforts actually made a difference, rather than just making him feel good about giving away money. And Isabella, still somewhat overwhelmed by the entire experience, agreed while insisting that any recognition should go to the families who were working so hard to overcome their challenges, rather than to the volunteers who were simply doing what neighbors should do for each other. The visit concluded with Ronaldo helping Isabella finish her inventory work, learning firsthand about the detailed organization required to run an effective food distribution program. And by the time he left, both of them understood that this was the beginning of a long-term partnership rather than a one-time charitable gesture. Because Isabella had found someone who shared her belief that addressing poverty required both immediate assistance and systemic change, while Ronaldo had found a mentor who could help him use his resources in ways that truly empowered communities rather than creating dependency. In the months that followed, Isabella became a regular advisor for Ronaldo's charitable foundation, helping to design programs that addressed root causes of food insecurity while maintaining the dignity and agency of the people they served. And her influence could be seen in the foundation's emphasis on education, job training, and community development alongside emergency assistance, because she had taught him that true charity empowers people to build better futures rather than simply managing their immediate crises. The story of their meeting became legendary among Madrid's charitable organizations, not because of the celebrity involvement, but because it demonstrated how genuine human connection and shared commitment to service could bridge any gap in background or circumstances. And Isabella often told other volunteers that the most important thing about that Thursday morning was not that a famous footballer had visited their food bank, but that she had met someone who understood that helping others was not about being seen as generous, but about recognizing the fundamental interconnectedness of human experience and the responsibility that comes with having more than you need when others are struggling to meet their basic requirements for survival and dignity.